I can remember backing the Strafe Kickstarter way back in January 2015. I still remember someone on Steam bringing the game to my attention, and what Pixel Titans did reveal about the game in its current state was enough for me to drop down $50 at the time. Originally, their estimated delivery date was August 2015, and for a whole multitude of reasons, it didn't finally see release until May 2017. I kind of feel like a grumpy old man here, swinging my walking cane around and complaining about the state of the world, and yet I have to do it and speak the truth because Strafe is a frustrating, unfinished, unrefined, and buggy mess that has not been worth the wait. But what is Strafe all about? Well, in the game's opening cinematics/tutorial, we're shown an ironically cheesy introduction video congratulating us on being selected as a scout or scrapper for the Icarus spaceship. After this short and fairly run-of-the-mill sequence, which introduces the base mechanics of collecting scrap for credits, the game promptly begins. Now, I'm guessing I missed something along the way here because for some reason the Icarus spaceship is now gone to hell and everyone's turned into space zombies, with the various robot sentries of the Icarus also turning hostile. And so begins the actual game, where you shoot your way through various levels across 4 different zones, all procedurally generated, which means no 2 playthroughs are ever going to be the same. And yeah, look, that's true in principle, but you're going to quickly start seeing the same room layouts used over and over, and have a constant sense of deja vu as you're moving through familiar looking environments almost repeatedly. The most basic and common enemies you'll encounter are these ones that look like a combination of the ogres from Quake and the mutants from System Shock 2, and about all these guys can do is run right up to you in great numbers with zero self-preservation. Other enemies fire at you from a distance with laser pistols, and then there's robots and a ventilation shaft. Yes, a goddamn ventilation shaft that shoots projectiles. Later zones have alien creatures and humanoid enemies armed with shotguns, but the bulk of the enemies are these brain-dead cannon fodder type zombies that offer up practically zero challenge and about the same amount of gameplay variety. The way they all just idiotically swarm your position with zero tact or intelligence is just annoying. Enemies encountered in the later areas are a little bit more varied, but still their attacks consist mostly of just beelining towards the player as quickly as they can, or just standing still and shooting at you. Riveting stuff. Moving on, we've got the weapons, which are also kinda piss poor. In Strafe's defense, there isn't any kind of weapon limit in the game, but you do only get to choose from 3 at the beginning. A machine gun, a shotgun, and a railgun. Everything else you pick up in the environment has very limited ammo and isn't all that good to begin with, aside from maybe the rocket launcher. I think the reason the main weapons are also horrible is because their primary fire modes just flat out suck. If you're going to throw so many enemies at the player, then the player should at least be able to shred through them pretty easily. I mean, imagine playing Left 4 Dead and the zombies having thrice the amount of health points, and that's what it kind of feels like in Strafe. But even outside of the damage output, the way they all handle just feels like shit. The spread on the machine gun, for instance, is absolutely ludicrous. I'm not kidding when I say it's the kind of spread you'd see in a game like CSGO or even Call of Duty if you were firing full auto from the hip and not aiming down the iron sights, and as a result I found myself spamming the grenade launcher alt fire almost constantly to just stay alive. Adding in a reloading mechanic is also something decidedly un-old school, and combined with the weapon spread, it makes this weapon feel the complete opposite of what the whole game's trying to aim for. Now look, these mechanics are fine and dandy. I have no problem with weapon spread or reloading unless you include them in a game that's tried to blatantly pass itself off as old school. There's nothing old school about a machine gun with that kind of spread when fired at full auto. One of the other guns you're given is a railgun, which is underwhelming and also inexplicably inaccurate from medium to long distances. The positive side to it being that it's able to kill most enemies in a single hit, and the drawback being it has a limited magazine capacity before having to be reloaded. Now the shotgun is the quintessential old school FPS weapon, and somehow they've even managed to fuck that one up as well. But having said that, it's easily got one of the most effective secondary fire modes in the game. It launches out a sort of projectile similar to the alt fire from the flat cannon in the Unreal Tournament games. When this projectile comes into contact with anything, it detonates, sending out shrapnel in all different directions. And because you're always inundated with brain-dead enemies swarming you in droves, it becomes useful for crowd control. As a result though, you'll burn through your ammo supply much quicker, as the alt fire for weapons uses almost an entire magazine each time. You can upgrade these guns through upgrade stations you find in the game, although you've got no control over what upgrades you're given. However, you can revert back to the old firing mode if you don't like it. As it is with buying upgrades or items in between stages, it seems they're selected at random because, you know, the whole RNG thing. You buy items and upgrades by either collecting credits or converting scrap to credits at special machines, and scrap's also used to craft armor and ammo as well. On the plus side, the movement controls are buttery smooth and responsive, which is a good thing because you're going to have to be bunny hopping around almost constantly just to stay alive, due to the player's huge hitbox causing you to take more damage than you really should. I think too, one of the biggest problems is that the first zone in the game, the Icarus ship, is quite honestly the worst in the entire game. It's just horrible. When you get out of the ship, the environments become a lot more opened up and allow you to freely avoid enemies a lot easier, and it's kind of clear that the Icarus ship was the first thing they threw together, and it definitely needed more polish. The randomness of the levels doesn't really help things either, but neither does the bare bones gameplay. I mean, there's barely any kind of roguelike mechanics, and from level to level, there's no real sense of pacing. As soon as a level begins, you're attacked relentlessly from every single enemy in the area, and the only time the action ever really stops is when you've killed everything. There's perks you get throughout the level for your weapons, and they don't even tell you what it's upgrading. I'm guessing going off the icons for each perk that it's upgrading damage, accuracy, weapon capacity, and etc., but who knows? Likewise in the shops, half the time there's no on-screen text to tell you what you're even looking at. And these upgrades are stupidly expensive in relation to how much scrap and credits you find per level. You're lucky if you can afford the cheapest item available. I will give credit where credit is due though, they've really nailed the way the game looks and sound. I don't know if I'd say it looks like a game made in 1996 though, it looks more like a game made in the late 90s with the texture work and environments you'd see in a game like Quake 2. More than 1996 when we had games like Hexen and Strife that featured sprite work over 3D modeling. In the game's defense too, it is gloriously violent, and from the first kill you make, the red stuff starts flying all over the place, and using explosive weapons is awesomely over the top. I gotta say though, I'm not sure where this whole meme started where 90s shooting games were so incredibly gory and violent. I mean, yeah, in games like Quake and Duke Nukem 3D and so forth, they were kinda gory in the sense that you could blow enemies up with rocket launchers, and similarly with Doom, you could jib enemies if you hit them with a rocket launcher or a powered up berserker fist. But blood didn't really spray out of an enemy's head like a goddamn geyser, and the environments weren't stained with blood and body parts. The level of gore in Strafe is more brutal Doom than it is Doom, if that makes sense, but honestly look, that's not that much of a negative point, and it's one of the few redeeming qualities this game has on offer. With the visuals too, they seem to be confused, including a deliberate lack of detail, but also an undeliberate lack of art style. Yeah look, games in the mid-90s didn't look amazing, but they still had appealing art styles and some rich, detailed sprite work. Look at a game like Hexen for instance, or even Duke Nukem 3D, those games are heavily stylized and appealing despite being pixelated. Strafe gets the aesthetic down, but it just looks generic. It's pixelated and blocky, but it lacks the creativity and artistic flair of the games it's trying to emulate. Yeah, I can see they spent a lot of time on the trailers for the game, making it look like a crappy VHS tape, and the tutorial in the game has a filter on it that looks like you're viewing it through some kind of CRT monitor. Remember, they should have spent more time on carrying that over into the actual game itself and let the substance back up the style. If someone says this is some kind of successor to games like Doom or Quake, well, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Doom and Quake were all about taking on multiple enemies who had different attack patterns and strategies. Weapons would be more or less effective against certain enemy types, and you had to micromanage your health, your armor, and ammunition throughout pre-constructed levels. Strafe is a game where every level is randomly generated by a computer, where every enemy is brain dead, ammo is universal, and you get your health from vending machines. And some of the shops even lack the crucial machine that turns scrap into credits. I mean, what, did you just forget that mechanic entirely? Is Strafe horrible? Well, not completely, but I can't see how this thing was worth all the wait. And I have to wonder what the hell these guys have been doing the last couple of years with all our time and money. It's got the most basic shooting mechanics you'd need to get a game across the finish line, and about the only thing I kind of genuinely liked about the whole thing is that cute girl in the tutorial video. I mean, you know, brunettes in glasses, that's kind of my jam.
Okay, let's get scrapping.
They also kind of nailed the way bunny hopping feels, I'm not gonna lie. But look, I'd like to make a suggestion. If you want to play an FPS game that feels like it was made in 1996, then play an FPS game that was made in 1996. You know, in that year alone, we had Descent 2, we had Power Slave, Duke Nukem 3D, we even had Quake and Final Doom. All of those are easy to pick up somewhere on the internet and play, and I guarantee all of them will offer up more depth, challenge, and ultimately fun than Strafe ever could. In this current state, I simply can't recommend Strafe. It feels like an early access game, not something that's been worked on for over 2 years. Maybe check it out in a few months when it's been patched a bit and it's cheaper, and in the meantime there's plenty of other first-person roguelike games out there that are far superior in every aspect. This is not the return of Doom or Quake in the slightest, and the whole 1996 angle they've taken is a marketing ploy. This is a subpar roguelike shooting game at its absolute best. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but if you're going to imitate something, then you better do it right, which Strafe sadly does not. Put it back in the oven for another 2 years, Pixel Titans, it's not done yet.
We love that spirit. So experiment often and stay safe out there.